Hey friends, this is Joseph Maynor. So what I want to do in this video, I think, is an introduction to drama and how drama relates to power, how entertainment relates to relation, which has an impact on power. Because most people really can't function alone. And so they need to relate. And the need to relate sets up a desire to relate. And then there's satisfaction of that desire that comes from many sources. So this is really the conundrum of the feminine. The desire to relate, how to satisfy the desire to relate. And then the desire of the masculine is how to satisfy the desire to be alone, right? And ultimately, neither one of these exists independently of the other. So there's got to be a marriage between yin and yang in this sense. So notice that words, the company of words, is really what causes entertainment and relation. Finding a good story, finding a good narrative. And people present themselves as taking themselves seriously in relation to you as a kind of showman, right? That's entertainment. And don't think that you're free from being entertainment. We can look at somebody like Donald Trump, right? And kind of scapegoat Donald Trump, but, do we all do it? See? That's where humility comes from, is that we all do it. That's where the principle of charity actually arises, is when you create a relation to reality that goes beyond power. That goes beyond salesman talk, preacher talk, expert talk. That goes beyond narratives. Like, who's the enemy? The enemy is what goes against your survival, even if it's a spiritual perspective. Right? There's not necessarily a distinct division between spirituality and the human. See, what's permanent is often what we make permanent rather than what's really permanent. So we have to become aware of marketing and understand power-minded people. All of us are power-minded people, and understanding power. And sort of truth as social glue. I mean, how much truth would you espouse? Would you be polarizing or divisive if you didn't have a need to relate or a need to create a tribe? A need to create a customer? See, this is why you can't be entirely ashamed of survival, but you have to put survival in the right kind of perspective. We're all doing it. All of us have a dark side. We're all doing it. We're all dividing from our ego's perspective. And you can look back at your own behavior and see, man, sometimes I've been a dick. I've been a real dick. I could have handled that in a different way. I did not. But then you also have to accept yourself too, because you realize that if you could have done better, you would have done better. So you have to let yourself off the hook just as much as you hold yourself responsible. See? You got to get that balance right. It's got to be intuitively right. That control freaking is really the underlying issue. And there are hidden and subtle uses of power, right? The white knight, the person who's like, I'm the saint, right? I'm teaching you to be a saint. Really, right? Where's your dark side? Well, you don't want to reveal your dark side because that's like saying I suck at my job. Do you think I'm going to, as a senior litigation paralegal, do you think I'm going to willingly approach my clients and tell them that I'm I have some flaw? Not if I want to eat. Right? So with regard to your job, you have an egoic interest in kind of fear-mongering about what it's like to not have you on board. And to recognize that and to see, dude, it's ugly, right? But ugly is good because it's here. You have to accept the ugly side of yourself and realize that it's not beautiful. It's ugly. And to kind of extend the concept of beauty to capture your shadow, right? That's kind of post-enlightenment work, is to kind of go this direction. Because otherwise you just, you're engaging in politics, you're engaging in judging, you're imposing on other people. And misery loves company. A miserable person wants everyone around them to be just as miserable as they are. Right? So you have to scapegoat other people. You have to have some kind of an enemy. Like somebody's got to be stupid, somebody's got to be nuts. But see, it's like, somebody who doesn't have kind of an understanding of language and metaphysics and how reason is just another form of power. It's another form of me telling you that my narratives are good for you and your narratives are bad for others. And then you say to yourself, well, maybe I should just avoid conflict. Well, there are pros and cons to avoiding conflict. There are pros and cons to conflict resolution. Often it involves a kind of higher consciousness perspective, self-restraint on some level, right? You can't just be like an emotional train wreck when you're dealing with somebody in a conflict, unless you want to lose and look really stupid. Notice this, that nobody has a problem with a crazy person that inspires them. Think of Donald Trump, right? I'm not a flaming liberal, believe it or not. Like, I like certain Republicans. I'm not entirely liberal. But, dude, come on, man. You know what I'm saying? Nobody has a problem with a crazy person that inspires them. That's the entertainer. That's the showman. That's the sophist. That's the person who creates a tribe. They create a cult to trust them, but they're creating a power relation between them and you, right? Like, you're part of my family and you got to trust me. So they're playing off of that kind of thing. And this is where it's important to understand like the truth versus opinion dichotomy, like to put things like that into question. Like, is this necessity real or is it a perceived illusion? Right? Because ideas can create their own loop that starts to influence your feelings. Right? Now it's like us versus them. And so discontent is not for sharing. It sets up a reverse law of attraction effect. And so you're entirely engulfed in karma. Right? And you have a negative vortex for law of attraction, where it's a whining mentality. So you're going to live a life where there's pros and cons to your whining mentality. So you just got to be aware that that's what you're creating. Right? There's no judgment here. It's like, just know what you're dealing with. So control freaks, gaslighters, they think in terms of black and white. They use the company of words. So truth becomes a social glue that makes us, it creates a tribe. There's us versus them. And so there's pros and cons to blaming or finger pointing. Finger pointing can be very entertaining, right? And we're attracted to entertainment just as much as we're attracted to like somebody trying to like really get down to the bottom of something. Actually, and I'm not so sure that there's like a division between those two actually. So even philosophy on some level is sophistry. See, right? You didn't see that one. It's rhetoric. So maybe you have more of a dark side than you acknowledge, and there's consensus rules to everything you're doing in spirituality and philosophy. And so the problem of sophistry is actually much deeper than what people realize. And this gets into politics and power, right? So politics, I think certain postmodern philosophers have elevated politics almost over truth. That truth, in a sense, is a form of politics. Somebody bringing a shitstorm in to your direction, intentionally, recklessly, negligently, right? They're challenging your perception of reality. That's a power move. And it's better to be well by yourself than sick with another. So there's an interplay between hierarchying and interplaying dualities. So for example, morality, for example. Like there's a sense in which you can be the white knight in life and give everybody the one right answer that doesn't just satisfy your taste, but goes beyond taste and borders onto truth. This is good, not just from my perspective, but from every perspective. And you can persuade in different forms of clothing, whether it's like logical or rhetorical means. But ultimately, it's all about winning for you, right? You want to win. You want to be right. You want to be the best. And you're vocal about it. So you bring a conflict of interest into every perspective because you basically want to push the idea that you need to preserve your relation to another person by being right. And then, you often wonder too with some of these people, like, so what's wrong with you? So you always have to best everyone as a default relation, right? Can you imagine me like going around saying, I'm fucking stupid, don't listen to me, don't buy anything from me, don't hire me? No, nobody would do that, right? So your survival is setting up a power relation, and you're using concepts and language to sustain that relation over other people. And you take this masculine perspective that when you boil it down, it gets very simple. But there's a conflict of interest in your marketing where you're the macho man instead of the wise masculine. And the thing is that people who are being controlled, they're not happy. And people controlling are not happy. And so misery loves company, right? So like when you're happier, you're less inclined to want to control other people. So you don't have a reverse law of attraction. You have a positive law of attraction where you radiate like hope and sovereignty to other people instead of you got to mind meld with me and you got to believe what I believe because what I believe is true and what you believe is shit. Because humility doesn't taste good to somebody who's trying to survive. See, you need to have like more of a abundance mindset to really get humility or to value humility because it's so much more entertaining from like a drama perspective. It's so much more like fun to talk shit, basically. So see, hopefully this video, what I'm teaching you guys in this video is how to do kind of like a contemplation on being dramatic and the metaphysics of drama, why it's here. Because it creates a relation. It creates an addiction. If something isn't fun, right, you're not gonna care. You're gonna go away. So what people do is they make something fun, and they have that capacity to create a tribe. And so they're a showman in that way. They're a marketer. That's what makes them a marketer, is their ability to be able, their willingness to do that too. So there's a moral component to it. Maybe they're unconscious of it, but their willingness to do that too. And they may change on that. They may shift on that as they get older. They may say, they may move from like stage orange to stage green, or from stage yellow to stage turquoise, where they may say, I don't want to live that way anymore. I don't want to be polarizing anymore. I don't want to have this like warlike mentality, as entertaining as it is. And because what you're doing is you're basically overcharging selfishness. Imagine you're a prosecutor. So what you're doing is you're taking the attention off yourself by overcharging other people of selfishness. It's sneaky, but it's not too sneaky. Let me say. At some point you realize, don't let anything live rent-free in your mind. Because when you're happier, you're less touchy regarding yourself and others. Like Sadhguru talks about this, like you're giving a piece of mind to other people. You're giving a piece of your mind to other people. See, I'm right, you're wrong. Right? I'm making a distinction between friends and enemies. It's a very moral mentality. And we've gotten to the point, actually, I think in the United States, where the morality starts to look ridiculous because it's moved from like stage blue to stage orange. And one more point I want to make, and I'll follow up on that in politics for the second half of this video, but when you're less happy, you become less tolerant of things that are annoying to you. So what I want to do is I want to take a break. I'll come back and we'll talk about what I think some of the shifts are in culture that are really kind of setting the undertone for this kind of polarizing drama mentality, entertaining mentality, and how it's creating backlash. So just give me 1 second, from a political perspective. So just give me 1 second. All right, friends, welcome back. So what I want to do in this video is I want to talk about politics kind of from my own life's perspective. So, and also from what I've read to United States politics, just to get a kind of concrete understanding, I think, of what's happened here. But I think this idea that like conflict started at a certain point is naive. There's always been conflict in politics in the United States, going all the way back to the Revolutionary War, going all the way back to the Civil War, and everything that happened after that. We tend to think, oh yeah, like, the conflict started with Clinton, or it started with Bush Jr. or Bush Sr. No. Okay. Qualitatively, though, there's different things that happen. So I think I can give a little bit of a practical perspective on this. So, if you watch interviews of John F. Kennedy, and you compare him to interviews of Trump, you can see exactly how politics has changed. I mean, love or hate John F. Kennedy, he was like a brilliant mind. You know what I'm saying? Like his interviews are like super dense and substantive. And a lot of Republicans and conservatives actually had respect for John F. Kennedy. He was a military man. And he, did some things that a lot of conservatives actually appreciated. And but you can see the difference between how he interfaces with the media and how Trump interfaces with the media. For Trump, it's all about like a 13-year-old girl interacting on social media, right? I mean, that's his dirty little secret, right? Is that he integrates the human feminine, the dark side of the human feminine, with his antics. He's a showman, see. John F. Kennedy was not a showman. Richard Nixon, okay, so during the time of Nixon, this is when the Republicans really started to hunker down. Like people think, oh no, it started with Newt Gingrich, it started with Reagan. No, it actually started with Nixon. So Nixon was like a brilliant litigator. He's a brilliant lawyer that came from a very humble background. And this is when, he started to realize that Republicans or conservatives needed to really have their own media, right? And take a really hard line, kind of divisive perspective against the Democrats. And he was willing to kind of push the boundaries of the law in the same way that you might think that Clinton did later on from the liberal perspective. This is why conservatives hate Clinton. Because Clinton's like the smooth-talking, fast-talking country lawyer, whereas Nixon is like the tough, no-nonsense litigator, right? And they both sort of are kind of the same in a way. Morally bankrupt on some level too, right? Although Nixon, if you watch his interview with Robert Frost, it's brilliant, He actually does try to portray himself as having character, and so did Clinton. So does Clinton, right, with his foundation work and so on. I mean, none of us are perfect. And then I think Obama. Okay, so then you had like in the 80s, you had radio, which started to become a vehicle for politics, and you had like Rush Limbaugh, for example, in the 80s, who was giving a very kind of partisan, ultra-conservative perspective, and people were eating it up because it was like funny. It's just entertaining, right? The conservatives are masters at entertaining you through division, divisiveness. The liberals are also divisive, but they're trying to do things like from like a more holistic perspective, which often doesn't get through to people. Like think Kamala Harris losing to Trump, right, this year, 2025. Last year, 2024. Because most people are addicted to other people, and they're tribal. So somebody who's funny and entertaining is going to win over somebody who's serious and boring. That is the separation between lower and higher consciousness people, is that higher consciousness people can be alone with their thoughts and pick their thoughts carefully rather than just going with some kind of a flow. Then you had Newt Gingrich. I remember this. This was like 1993, I think, where Newt Gingrich decided that Republicans needed to treat Democrats like the enemy, right? Before this, there was conflict between Republicans and Democrats, obviously, but Newt Gingrich was the first, I would say, kind of like drama queen who said, here's the thing, we got to treat these people like they're the enemy. And you can see that in Mitch McConnell when he's like, our number one job is to make sure that Obama is a one-term president. Now, I'm not saying that this didn't happen on the left, especially with like Clinton, Obama, Biden, right? Obviously, the left is playing these games too. So you got to be careful of thinking like, there's a good guy and a bad guy all the time. No, it's politics, man. Right? Politics it's about power. And what Spinoza would say is that what is here is good politically. So Trump winning is actually good because it exists in reality. So there's some reason why Trump won. Personally, I think it's because the United States has moved from stage blue to stage orange. Although it started out with stage orange ideals, really stage orange didn't really start to emerge in the United States fully until like 1980, right? That's when it's like, okay, we no longer have an enemy. We no longer have the Soviet Union. We no longer have, these other sort of external enemies. Now, we're going to create our neighbor as an enemy, like stage orange. Like, I'm going to sue you. You know what I'm saying? You're my neighbor, but I'm going to sue you, right? Like, it's all about, like, law, individuation, kind of like the what am I thinking? Like the libertarian mentality. Libertarianism is very stage orange. So I think starting with like Bush Sr., or maybe even Reagan, although Reagan still had some kind of stage blue, like residual kind of like World War II mentality, but starting with like Bush Sr., I think the United States really started to move heavily, like the first Iraq War, Desert Storm. That was very stage orange. Very stage orange. Like, we're not fighting you because you attacked us, like World War II. We're fighting you because we want to protect our boys from somebody else. Desert Storm. And it looked like a video game too, right? It looked too cute. See, that's stage orange. So I think conservatives have shifted from stage blue to stage orange with Trump at this point. And I don't know how they reconcile that in their heads. Like, I don't know how they like still think of themselves as Christians, right? To me, that's weird. Because I got to tell you, man, like, if there's an asshole who has so many followers for being an asshole in life, it's Donald Trump. Period. Now you could say, okay, Joseph, you're just, emitting sour grapes. You don't like the guy. You have Trump derangement syndrome. On some level, I agree with you. Like, I've talked to liberals out here where I'm just like, dude, get the fuck out of here. Like, Trump isn't entirely bad. But I think we need to understand the mechanics of why that's popular, why drama and entertaining and comedy and lightness and meanness is an offer to join. And it satisfies a very deep need that we have to hold our narrative about reality as the one right perspective, and to feel a cheap sense of self-esteem by pitting ourselves up against other aspects of reality. Like, yeah, that's lower. That's lower down. Because the higher aspect of reality would be to realize, don't play that stupid game in the first place. I mean, one of the aspects of power that's really cool is to be able to get beyond power, to transcend power. Now, does this mean that you're going to be a saint? No, you're still going to be, on some level, you're still going to be a finite perspective like you've always been. And you got to sort of like want to change yourself and want to forgive yourself in equal measure in that way as you have more of an understanding. But I think you really should get over yourself as the white knight. I think that's very stage green. Stage orange is fucking with stage green, right? Stage yellow is too weak to really do anything about orange at this point in the United States. And so we're going through, I think politically, we're going through a movement into orange, deep into orange with Trump. Because that's what Trump is, right? It's like being a conservative without a conscience. being entirely selfish, but following the law at the same time. Although he doesn't always follow the law. He pushes it. Like a lot of stage orange people do push following the law. Right? The lawyer mentality goes all the way back to Nixon. Let's see what I can get away with. So, interestingly enough, like Nixon and Clinton have like most of the Supreme Court case law on the presidency. That's kind of interesting, like if you look into that. Okay, friends, hopefully this was a good video. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.